Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Islamic Calling podcast. So today we are going to talk about Mr. Neuroscientist Sam Harris. So in case you guys don't know, Sam Harris is a very famous philosopher, atheist philosopher. He makes arguments against religion and all types of theistic ideas. And he's very famous.
Philosophy is not a popularity contest.
And you guys probably know who he is, but regardless, so recently he made a video in regards to the situation in Afghanistan, and I was quite curious about that, so I decided to take a look. And let's take a look at what he said, and then we'll judge, inshallah.
There seems to be a consensus forming domestically in America. I mean, maybe it's worldwide, but there's a kind of neo-isolationist consensus on the far left and the far right, and maybe far is in scare quotes. I don't know how far in either direction you have to go before you run into this, but it seems that both sides of the political spectrum have large cohorts that agree that not only did we have to leave Afghanistan, but we had no business being there in the first place, right? And the whole project was illegitimate. And on the right, I think you tend to hear people denigrating the Afghans and thinking that they just, they're not ready for democracy. They want the Taliban. They're barbarians. This was a fool's errand to try to bring them into the 21st century. And, above all, at this moment, let's keep their damn refugees out of our country.
Okay, so he's not wrong on this. Some right-wing idiots do say this. And it's an argument based on modernism. So in case you guys don't know, modernism is the idea of that the more modern we are, the better off we are. So the argument goes something like this. Premise 1, modernism causes human flourishing. Premise 2, Afghanistan and other countries like it lacks modernism. Conclusion, therefore Afghanistan lacks human flourishing, which is why they are backward barbarians and they need to be fixed and be more modern. The first premise, that modernism causes human flourishing, is false. Modernism does not always cause human flourishing. Let me explain. For example, one of the biggest disasters that are facing humanity right now is global warming or climate change. What exactly caused this climate change, by the way? It was modern technology, it was modern airplanes, it was your modern cars. There are even scientific data which shows that this whole global warming mess, it's completely man-made, and it's an industrialization, especially oil and our reliance on fossil fuel, played a huge part in this. So the argument that modernism is a good thing or that modernism leads to human flourishing, that's only partly true. Because modernism causes human flourishing for a little bit, but then as a consequence, it literally threatens to make the whole human race suffer for who knows how long. As a matter of fact, you can even see this happening even in Afghanistan. There's one article in The Nation, and it describes how a Chinese company literally stole people's land in order to build a mine. So in Afghanistan, there's a province called Logar. And in this Logar province, there is a lot of, it's very rich in natural resources. So there is a big company that started a mine over there in order to mine the natural resources. Or more specifically, so basically they were mining for copper. And the article says the following. On the ground in Logar province, civilians are angry, frustrated, and scared. Muhammad Nazir, Muslimia, told me that life is no longer normal here because of the mine. There's too much hardship. There are engineers in this community who are doing very low-level jobs. The advertised benefits of Afghanistan's mining boom had not reached Davo. I arrived at a mud compound as American helicopters flew overhead and was quickly ushered into an open room with red rugs on the floor. 10 men with long beards, white turbans, salwar kameez, and brown waistcoat were waiting to share their stories. And Chief Elder Malik Mullah Mizan said our presence could result in insurgent intimidating them after we left. Over piping hot tea and biscuits, Mizan told me that the Chinese had confiscated his family's property and never paid compensation or explained what they were doing. There was an information vacuum filled with rumors spread by scared locals, corrupt officials, and the Taliban. People have been displaced, and there's been no incentive or employment offered to local people. Mizan said, when the roads are built for the mine, water in the area will be affected. when extraction begins, it will get more polluted under the ground, in the air and the soil. There's been no good intention on the part of the government and the company. If there were, the small village where I come from would have had some peace over the last 5 years. We feel like we've been invaded. So as you guys can see from this report, one thing is very, very clear, which is that buildings, things like mines and this type of modern infrastructure is having a really bad impact on the local population. And to the point where they mainly rely on agricultural stuff and water, and there's a threat that these natural resources could very well be polluted or ruined. If that is the case, then the local population will suffer greatly because they won't be able to farm or do agricultural work. So, and this is the reality of modernism in many places. In many countries, a large number of natural resources, especially trees, are cut down so that they can build more factories. As a result, they're releasing a huge number of carbon dioxide gas, which again, as a result, heats up the planet even more. Now, as you guys can see, this is the picture of the carbon footprint by country in 2021. Now, in case you notice, most of the countries that are red has the highest amount of carbon emission, and majority of these countries are countries that has huge industries or quote unquote modernized. For example, if you look at the top 10 countries which emits the highest number of carbon dioxide, this list goes as number 1 China, number 2 United States, number 3 India, Russia, Japan, Germany, South Korea, Iran, Canada, and Saudi Arabia. And what's interesting is that most of these countries are also in the list of that has the most biggest industry. Here, this is a list of top 10 manufacturing countries in the world, and it has China at number 1, then United States number 2, then Japan, Germany, India, South Korea, Italy, France, and United Kingdom. So as you can see, most of the countries that releases the most amount of carbon dioxide are countries that has the biggest amount of industries. Okay, so as you can see in this chart and in this article by EPA government, it actually lists how much carbon dioxide each economic sector releases, and here it says the following: global greenhouse gas emissions by economic sector, and the largest percentage of this is electricity or heat production, the thing that's caused these savages to be quote unquote modern. And then you have agriculture and forestry and other land use. Again, when he says agriculture, he's not talking about like agriculture as in like in Afghanistan, more like modern kind of agriculture, where they're using equipments and stuff like that, which needs oil. And then you have transportation, and then you have industry. So these are the 4 things that causes the largest amount of carbon dioxide to be released. Now, the thing about agriculture is something I can understand. Okay, fair enough. We need food. But what about the other ones? Like the electricity industry and transportation is most definitely causing the largest amount of carbon dioxide gas. There is no denying that this so-called modernism is actually causing devastating effect to the planet. So this argument that that modernism causes human flourishing is absolutely false. Modernism does not always cause human flourishing. If anything, modernism has caused one of the biggest disaster the planet has ever faced. But regardless, let's see what else it says.
Right, so there's that attitude on the far right. On the left, people tend to denigrate America and Western civilization, and so the idea that we could pretend to want to spread our values to the rest of the world when we're the greatest criminals and terrorists in history, and I mean it's surreal. On the left, you have people who list their preferred pronouns in their Twitter bios, and who would want to see their neighbors and coworkers destroyed for telling off-color jokes, but who will simultaneously claim that we shouldn't judge the treatment of women under the Taliban. Right? I mean, who are we to pretend to care about these women, and who are we to even judge this ancient culture for its own, norms?
Okay, so here he's committing the black and white fallacy. Or a false dilemma. He's trying to make it seem like there's only 2 options, which is that either these people on the left, they have to condemn these people who are racist and other type of nonsense. Those who condemn that, then they also have to condemn, the Muslims for their treatment of women, blah blah blah. Not necessarily. This is not some kind of black and white. There is a third option here. These are not the only two options. And the third option is they can call out this other nonsense that they see, but they also realize that while they disagree with other cultures, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to agree with oppressing those cultures. Do you understand what I mean? Like, these are not the only two options. And the thing is, although I disagree with their misguided notions and on many different things, this is not something they're wrong on. They are absolutely right. And America is an evil empire. I'm sorry, but they are. Here, let me explain how much of an evil empire you guys are. Okay, according to one report by Statista, it lists all the death toll of wars since 9/11, and it says since 9/11 it is estimated that just over 800,000 people have been killed in wars involving the United States around the world. 800,000 people. These are human beings. One of the most shocking numbers that came out from the liberal wars are the death of children. According to one study by Save the Children, the heading, it says one child killed or maimed every 5 hours over 20 years of war in Afghanistan. Can you imagine? One child killed or maimed every 5 hours, or at least that's the estimate. The article says almost 33,000 children have been killed and maimed in Afghanistan over the past 20 years. An average of one child every 5 hours. And each of these numbers is a kid. Just stupid kids who are running around playing football or whatever. Kids who should be in school, learning. And the liberals kill them because something that has nothing to do with them. And this neurrrrrrroscientist, he's okay with this. He's okay with all these kids being killed. But he's not okay when their mothers wear a dress that he doesn't like. Can you imagine like the hypocrisy here? I mean, so he's complaining and talking about women's right? I mean, he's saying, oh, these Talibans, they're so evil, they don't treat their women right. But the liberals, they treat the women so right? I mean, they really care about Afghani women. They care about the Afghani women so much that they have killed nearly 33,000 of their children. They really love the Afghani women, don't they? Another study shows that US airstrikes have killed nearly 22,000 civilians since 9/11. And again, these are 22,000 innocent people. These are not terrorists. And that's only air drone strike. Another study shows that nearly 241,000 people were killed by other methods. So in total, these are like in the total numbers that US have killed. And this one, every time I see this, I get teared up. So it's a report by BBC. It says Afghanistan, US investigates civilian deaths in Kabul strike. So in case you guys forgot or don't remember, there's a strike that happened in Kabul where they supposedly killed an ISIS fighter. But they didn't kill an ISIS fighter. There was a New York Times article that came out and it completely exposed what the military actually did, which is that they killed an innocent person they thought was an ISIS fighter, and they killed nearly 7 children. I'm gonna read to you guys, and I just want you guys to see this really cute picture of this cute baby. I think her name is Somaya. She was 2 years old. And I'm gonna have the picture over here So you guys understand the gravity of the situation. The Pentagon says it can dispute claims that a US drone strike on a suspected suicide bomber in Afghanistan killed a number of civilians. The strike near Kabul airport killed 10 members of one family, including 6 children. Relatives have told the BBC the US military said that it was targeting a vehicle carrying at least one person associated with Afghan branch of Islamic State group, which is a lie. It's not true. The US was assessing and investigating reports of civilian death, it added. American commanders said there were significant secondary explosions, which is also false. There was no other explosions there. Implying there were explosives at the scene, which is another lie. There was no explosives at the scene. Again, check out the New York Times documentary, not documentary, the journalistic report on this, which may have harmed people nearby. Now, the youngest child to be killed was 2-year-old Sumaya, the oldest child of the 12-year-old Farzad, the family told the BBC. It's wrong, it's brutal attack, and it's happened based on wrong information, Ramin Yusuf, a relative of the victim, said. He added tearfully, why have they killed our family, our children? They are so burned out, we cannot identify their bodies, their faces. Another relative, Emal Ahmadi, told the BBC that it was his 2-year-old daughter who was killed in the strike. Can you imagine killing 7 children and using a drone strike? I mean, they were so badly burned that their family members couldn't even recognize them. This cute little baby, they burned her to such a degree that her father couldn't recognize her. Anyway, this is how much the liberals love the Afghani woman. That they're willing, they love the Afghani woman so much that they're literally burning their children alive, to the point that their parents can't even recognize them. This is human rights for you. This is liberalism for you. But regardless, let's see what else this comeback says. By the way, I'm not done with this. I will bring this point up again later on in the video, but let's just put a pin in this. Let's go back and let's see what else this comeback has to say.
But both sides seem to agree that we have no business being the world's cop, and that nation building never works. And and then you have these phrases, these catchphrases that do immense work here, where Afghanistan was the graveyard of empires, right? So this was ill-conceived, and we were committed to a forever war here, and on both sides, people seem to imagine that the reason why we were in there was to enrich ourselves in some way. We were stealing natural resources, and I'm sure both sides in the end will find some way to put the Jews at the back of all of this. I mean, it's just we're living in a information space that is contaminated by conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy theory?
I've stumbled onto a major company conspiracy.
So you guys didn't try to steal oil from Afghanistan? Wow, that's a bold claim. Okay, let's see how true this claim is. So he says that this is a conspiracy. So let me just read you guys some experts, some reports from a very well-written article. And he says the following. In 1998, Dick Cheney, now US Vice President, but then Chief Executive of a major oil service company, remarked, I cannot think of a time when we have had a region emerge as suddenly to become as strategically significant as the Caspian, which means the Middle Eastern countries. But the oil and gas there is worthless until it is moved. The only route which makes both political and economic sense is through Afghanistan. So this is Dick Cheney, who is the Vice President of a oil company, major oil company, saying that they need this oil from these Middle Eastern countries, and they need Afghanistan. They need to cross Afghanistan in order to bring this oil into their countries. Smith writes in his article, It's About Oil, that the first proponent of the Afghan oil route was the Breeders Group, an Argentinian company. Competition quickened with the entry of Unocol's John Emmel, who proposed a US-controlled pipeline paralleling Bride's route in 1998. Unocol signed a deal with the Taliban to build an 890 miles natural gas pipeline from Turkmenistan to Pakistan. But the plan was thwarted by continuing civil war. Unocol informed the Department of Energy that the gas pipeline would not proceed until an internationally recognized government was in place. In his book, Ahmed Rashid explains how Pakistan and the US agreed in 1984 to establish a pro-Western government in Afghanistan to guarantee the security of the Unocol pipeline. Now, I can already see Sammy here making the argument that well, none of this proves that we were there for oil, right? Okay, fair enough. So this idea, his argument is basically that we were there for human rights, we were there for the woman, right? We were there to do good things. Okay, fair enough, no problem. Let's take this metaphysical assumption and let's put it to the test, right? Let's do a thought experiment. If this is true, that America only went to Afghanistan because they care about human rights, they care about the women over there. If that is the case, then we should see this action being reflected in all of the US policies, right? So, for example, another country that they would consider, or logically should consider, where people don't have human rights is Saudi Arabia. And did they invade Saudi Arabia? No. Okay. Another country is North Korea. I mean, North Korea is the biggest, has one of the biggest human rights atrocities. Did they invade North Korea? No. Okay, so something's going wrong here. Maybe their human rights issue wasn't that severe. No, actually, it was pretty severe. I mean, in North Korea, people literally eat human flesh because they don't have any food. So yeah, I would say it's quite severe. Okay, so clearly something went going wrong here. China have a huge genocide happening right now with the Uyghur Muslim. Again, they didn't attack China. So why is it that when it comes to human rights, they only care about Afghanistan, a country in the middle of nowhere which has less human rights atrocities compared to countries like North Korea, and all of a sudden they care about human rights over there? Okay, so maybe they just care about human rights when it comes to Afghanistan because they just like the people over there. Maybe that's the case, okay? But that's also not true, because in 1998, as it says in the report, Unocol signed a deal with the Taliban to build an 890-mile natural gas pipeline from the Turkmenistan to Pakistan. Again, here they're commenting the begin the question, fellas. I mean, one of the premises is unfounded. If America was there to, liberate the woman and all that, then why were they making business deal with the Taliban in 1998? I mean, what happened? Like, did human rights just vanish in 1988? I mean, what happened? Did human rights say that, I'm going to take a break in the 90s, I'm going to go to the disco, I'm going to be busy, then after 9/11 I'm going to come back and we're going to go back to saving these oppressed people? No, you guys don't care about human rights. You don't care about human rights. Like, if you did, then clearly you wouldn't be making business deal with the Taliban. It's only after 9/11 that you guys started acting as if like Taliban is the villain. Before, you were fine with it. I mean, you're fine with North Korea, you're fine with China. I'm not fine with China, but like, you don't invade those countries. but all of a sudden you care about Afghanistan. So here's my question for you, Sammy, and I want to call it the Afghan woman question. If you guys really care about, the Afghan woman, the Afghan human rights atrocities, then why didn't you care in 1998? If you care about human rights atrocities, then why did you care about the North Koreans? Why don't you care about the Uyghurs? Why didn't you attack China? Why didn't you attack North Korea? I think it's a good question to ask. Regardless, let's see what else he says.
This was just completely unnecessary. There's kind of two arguments that are being heard. One is that this was a great idea, but the execution was terrible. Well, no one's denying the execution was a total fiasco. But I'm unconvinced it was the right policy decision.
It was the right policy decision. Wow, really? It was a great policy. I mean, like, this guy's like. Okay, so which part of you going into another sovereign country against their wish and just attack people there, start a war there over some criminals they have is justified? On what planet? How is this a right policy? Okay, you know what? Let's do a thought experiment. Let's say, for the sake of argument, this is correct. If there is a criminal or some kind of terror elements in a country, then the right response is to send in drones and do a drone strike onto that country, or send in the military onto that country. Right? Fair enough. Let's test this theory. Let's test this idea. Let's say in America there's some kind of a terror threat. Maybe some KKK members have killed some black people or something, I don't know, and they're taking people hostage or whatever, right? What would be the response of America be? Will they send in American troops to invade that state? Will they send in drones and bomb the hell out of that US state? Imagine it's in like Miami or something. Will they start bombing Miami using drones? No. As a matter of fact, it's very unlikely that they will send any troops or any drones. No. When it comes to their own citizens, they're gonna send in the FBI. They're gonna make sure that people are all out of the area, they're all safe, and then they're gonna try to deal with the kidnappers and whatnot. But when it comes to other countries, they'll go in there, they'll bomb them, they'll destroy their cities, they'll turn their cities into dust just to catch a few criminals. And this is the absolute liberal hypocrisy. You see, when it comes to human rights, they only care about human rights when it's within their own borders. But when it comes to outside of their borders, then they're like, I mean, if one black guy dies inside their border, then they're all going to be up in arms, and they're all going to be on the forefront of protest and whatnot. But if like hundreds of Africans in African countries die due to some evil dictator that the CIA had planted, then they're completely silent. I mean, if there's some kind of crime in their own country, they're going to take all kind of precautions, all kind of measures to make sure no civilians get hurt. They're going to clear the area, make sure that the kidnapper or whatever, they hand over the victims in a nice manner. I mean, why don't they send in drones in these areas where there are crimes happening in America? Why don't they level, cities like, like Texas or New York? Why don't they drone them? It's because they even As a matter of fact, you guys remember what happened with George Floyd, right? Those people who killed George Floyd got so much, they got a trial. Yet, when it comes to them killing little children, they get no trials, they get no justice. Not from these people. So these liberals, they literally care more about their own criminals inside their borders than they do about innocent children outside their borders. Borders that they themselves conquered. And that's the thing, right? They want to have their cake and eat it too. I mean, they will go into these countries and into this land, they'll conquer them, but they will not give them the same rights that they would give their own citizens. No, the US didn't go to Afghanistan for the right reasons. The Taliban had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. As a matter of fact, there was an interview with Mullah Zaif and ex-CIA Robert Greener, which shows that the Taliban did not agree with 9/11. They didn't agree with what bin Laden did.
Mullah Abdul Salam Zaif is one of the co-founders of the Afghan Taliban. He was there with Mullah Omar in 1994 in the White Mosque at Sangzisar when the Taliban was set up. Mullah Zaif in his book writes that even before 9/11, with the bombing of Tanzania and Nairobi, America was already pushing the Taliban government to hand over Osama bin Laden. And Mullah Zaif writes that the Taliban regime, in fact, gave 3 options to America. They said that either America should give proof of Osama bin Laden's involvement to their government, and they would present it in the Supreme Court, and Osama would be presented there, and if he was found guilty, he would be punished by Sharia law. They also offered that there would be a court set up with 3 attorney generals from 3 Islamic countries. The court would be in a 4th Islamic country, and again, Osama would be presented there. The Taliban government would be a partner to the court, and Osama would be tried. They offered a 3rd option, which would be to completely strip Osama of all his amenities in Afghanistan and take away his communications and just let him live there as a refugee. They also offered that Osama bin Laden should be presented in the court of the UN at Hague, and America could try him in that court. They also offered that they could set up a court in which both America and the Taliban regime would be partners, and Osama would be tried in that court. And he says that America rejected all those options and only insisted that Osama bin Laden would be handed over to America, and that is something that they refused to do for many reasons, which I'll ask him later. Mm-hmm. But looking back, Robert, was that an absolute cardinal error? Was it what he calls the trance of omnipotence that America suffers from?
Yeah, it's hard to say right now, I think, whether that was an error, because we don't know whether, in fact, they would have been able to work out in detail the different modalities as you've just laid them out. And I don't remember all of them, but I do remember some of them. And certainly there was a great deal of distrust, I think, not to put too fine a point on it, with regard to the Taliban judicial system, such as it was. But I did feel at the time that some of these other options ought to have been seriously explored. Certainly the opportunity, the possible opportunity of a trial through The Hague was a possibility to bring in a number of other Islamic countries and to present the evidence. Again, these things were dismissed out of hand by the American side, I think in part because they were perceived to be dodges. But in fact, I believed then and still believe now that some of them at least ought to have been seriously explored.
Mullah Zaif, I'd like to ask you that, you were very, very clear that the Taliban regime could not and would not hand over Osama bin Laden to America in the way that was being demanded. Can you explain why that was so important?
Osama bin Laden was not invited by Taliban to Afghanistan. Almost Osama bin Laden was like an heritage to Taliban remain from the past to the Taliban. It's become a part of the culture and after that. And really we were not interested to have a problem with the United States or with any other countries about any issue, including the Osama bin Laden. when something happened in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, and they blame the Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. He was involved with this issue. And we kindly request from United States to bring the proof evidence against Osama bin Laden. And we will not defend from him and from the guilty. And always we condemn this issue. And after the September 11, which it's happened, really I was very sad by this happening, and I condemn this issue. And the Afghanistan also condemned, from the foreign ministry, they condemned this issue. We asked for the evidence. Unfortunately, after that's happening, they didn't give us evidence, they didn't give us anything, and only they want the Osama bin Laden to be surrendered to American.
And they asked for evidence, which is completely reasonable. But the CIA provided no evidence for this. As a matter of fact, if you guys remember, in 2001, when the US forces invaded Afghanistan, there was almost little to no evidence that could show that bin Laden was actually involved with the 9/11. As a matter of fact, he even denied this, and they didn't have any evidence. And whatever evidence that only showed that he had a deep hatred for America, not that he was involved in 9/11. I mean, sure, he was involved in other attacks, but he was not. There's no evidence that shows that he was involved in 9/11. And so it makes no sense that the Taliban would all of a sudden hand him over without any evidence. It's only in 2004, like 3 or 4 years after the invasion, that he admitted that yes, he did. He was involved in the attack. So him attacking, so the liberals attacking Afghanistan was completely illegitimate. Now, let's say for the sake of argument that they did have evidence, that they did have camera footage of bin Laden admitting that he did this. Would they still have the right to invade a country just to apprehend a criminal? No. There's literally this is completely against any kind of international laws. For example, there is a professor called Ryan T. Williams from Drake University of law, and he wrote a paper where he said the following in the abstract of his research paper, where he said, Osama bin Laden's death has led many to question the efficiency of America's continued fighting in Afghanistan. Too often dismissed is any meaningful discussion of the length of the legality of war on terror in Afghanistan, where the US has promised to keep fighting until at least 2014. The use of force in international law is generally forbidden except under 3 conditions. Number 1 is self-defense. Number 2, pursuit of United Nations Security Council regulation. Or number 3, consent from a leader of an invaded state. After a careful examination of all 3, it is apparent that America's continued fighting in Afghanistan more than a decade after 9/11 does not fall under any category. By continuing to fight this illegal war, by continuing this illegal war, America loses a significant amount of moral high ground and tangible international leverage. Worse still, by relying on such illegitimate actions or illegitimate leaders' consent as justification for the war, America is unwittingly established a precarious blueprint for future states to follow. Whatever sound or unsound reason America has for continuing the war, its illegality foreshadows a very dangerous future. So the professor makes it very, very clear. American invasion of Afghanistan was completely illegal, and he knows what he's talking about. He's a professor of law. So no, Afghanistan was not invaded because of some kind of legitimate reason.
One could certainly admit that going into Afghanistan was perfectly legitimate. We went in for the right reasons. We had to go in, but then also concede that the project failed there for a variety of reasons that we need to understand and that weren't foreordained, right? Or you could further argue that despite how difficult our 20 years there were, the project itself was still salvageable, right? That, the serious combat for our troops had ended somewhere around 2014, and that our continued presence there would have been far preferable to what has now happened. I mean, we've been in South Korea for 70 years or so, and we've been in Western Europe longer than that, and no one's talking about a forever war with respect to those places. So it's clear that we can maintain troops in places for a sane purpose, whether it's humanitarian or geopolitical or both, without feeling that we have become the world's masochists or an evil empire.
And then Sam Harris talks about Korea, that they have been staying in Korea for 17 years. Yeah, and that's bad. That's also a bad thing. That's not a good thing. I mean, that's exactly what the British Empire did. I mean, they sent in their troops into different countries and colonized them. I mean, just to show you how much of a colonizing force America is, here's a map of all the countries where America has a military presence. As you can see, most of these countries where America has a military base. And the thing is, they have no reason to be there. And this is straight up colonization. I mean, according to a Stanford paper, colonization means a practice of domination which involves the subjugation of one people to another people. The practice of colonization usually involves the transfer of population to a new territory where the arrival lives as permanent settlers while maintaining political allegiance to their own country of origin. And this is exactly what happened to Afghanistan and Korea. The thing is, they went to Korea and, to quote unquote liberate them, and then they never left. This is a clear-cut colonization. Even though Korea had their own independence and have their own army. Now one could argue that maybe they're staying there because of North Korea, but again, this has nothing to do with North Korea because they have their own army. So them staying there makes no sense. Again, this is clear-cut colonization. Again, think about what they're doing to Japan. They literally nuked Japan and then they stayed there to make sure that the people never betray them. Again, this is colonization. And they did the same thing in Afghanistan. They colonized them, and that's their true intention. And as you guys can see from the map, they have literally conquered most of the world and subjugated most of the people of the world, either physically or culturally or through politics. And I see this sentiment in Korean people, which is that they think that America is there to save them, to help them, when in reality they have colonized them. That's what actually happened. But regardless, let's continue.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that a generation of women and girls is now going to be pitched back into the Dark Ages is something that no one should be comfortable with. And it's certainly an argument. It's all one needs for an argument to have continued our presence there for another generation at whatever sacrifice. It seemed, at this point, a truly minimal sacrifice, just to ensure that women and girls are not pointlessly immiserated for the rest of their lives under the Taliban.
And then Sam Harris comes with his crocodile tears, we're there for the woman, we're there for human rights. Again, if you're there for human rights, then why don't you invade Saudi Arabia? Why don't you invade China? I mean, in China, there's an actual genocide going on. Uyghur women are being forced to go through forced sterilization. They're being forced to forcefully, their organs are being forcefully harvested. Their families are being separated. They're being raped. I mean, isn't this human rights issues? Then why is it that America only care about human rights when it comes to Afghanistan and then completely ignore all these other human rights atrocities? It's because you guys don't care about human rights. You only went there because of some other geopolitical reason. This has nothing to do with human rights. So don't make a case for human rights. The truth is, you guys only invaded Afghanistan because Afghanistan is not strong enough to fight back. But you can't invade China because China itself is a colonial power, just like you. China is a communist colonial superpower. So you can't just take them on. And that's it. You liberals are a bunch of hypocrites. You're cowards. That's it. You're too much of a coward to attack countries like China or North Korea. Because if you do that, they're not some small country that you can bully. They will fight back. And another thing that I want to make very, very clear. We Muslims will never forgive you for what you did to Sumaya. Yes, this little girl right here. You guys remember her, right? and I show her a picture before, and let me just show you guys. And I want you to take a look at this picture. You know, this cute and chubby baby. Her name is Sumaya. She was 2 years old, and you know, it's really interesting. She reminds me a lot of my sister. My sister, when she was young, she was also very chubby. And kids this age are really cute because they just start to walk, and when they start walking, you know, they walk really funny. They kind of walk weird because they just learned how to walk. And she looks so cute because, you know, she's such a chubby and cute baby. You know what should have happened to her? She should have gone to school. She should be, I don't know, watching anime or other kind of, do all that kind of stupid kid stuff. Or watch cartoons, I don't know. What shouldn't have happened is she shouldn't have been blown up and burned to death. That shouldn't have happened. You see, unlike you liberals, we value our children. Because there's a hadith which says, Al-Ashith ibn Qais reported, I approached the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, during the delegation of Qidna. The Prophet said to me, do you have any children? I said, a boy was born to me. I was coming out to you from a daughter of Jamat. I wish in his place I could provide food for my impoverished people instead. The Prophet said, do not say this, for they are the delight of your eyes, and you will be rewarded if they pass away. If you say this, they will surely turn you into a coward and be a source of grief. They will surely turn you into a coward and be a source of grief. You can read about this in Musnad Ahmed 21,840, and this hadith is Sahih, graded by Sheikh Ala Arnad. Look at the difference between Prophet and what Prophet is teaching and what liberalism is teaching. Liberalism is teaching that if there's a criminal in a country, it's completely okay for you to blow up that country, to kill their children, to burn their children alive. And Prophet is saying that no, children are the delight of your eyes. They are the delight of your eyes. And Sumaya was the delight of our eyes. Never forget that. And I want to end the video here. Again, thank you guys for watching. Jazakallah khair. And if you can, please support me on Patreon. And before I go, I want to show a picture of all the children that we've lost at the hands of the liberals and the Kharijis. And may Allah grant them Jannah. You know, the hadith really explains this beautifully, the value of children. Because it shows that there was this guy and he didn't want to have children because, you know, children cost money and stuff like that. But the Prophet ﷺ, he reminded him that no, children are a blessing. They are a delight of your eyes. And Sumaya will always be a delight of our eyes. She's a very beautiful baby and she deserves to be happy. And I hope that she's playing somewhere in paradise and maybe she will see her parents again. And I say the same for all the children. And again, I'm gonna end with all picture of all the children that was killed in this latest drone strike. And I want you to remember these faces. I want you to never forget them and pray for them. Again, thank you guys for watching. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.